Hello and welcome to my video. Today I'm going to be painting this little Space Marine. I'm going to be painting it as if it's the first time you've ever painted a figure, so this is mainly for beginners. Apart from the purity seals that I scratch built in this video, everything is pretty much straight out of a starter kit. Now, normally when painting these, you'll be lured in by these pretty little pictures. There's no way you're going to paint that. Now, this is going to be more of a reflection on what it's actually going to look like, and close up, it looks pretty horrific. It's also going to be out of focus. But on the tabletop, the details are going to pop out just fine and it's going to look okay. So, I'd like to say thanks for watching. I hope you enjoy and have fun. Now, what colour am I going to paint you? So, as you can see in the close-up, it does look pretty terrible and nothing like those fancy box arts, but from tabletop or arm's length it looks good for your first try. Generally when you buy starter sets you get all the pieces onto the sprue, you just simply cut them off and snap them out. Normally when it's your first time trying this, you'd go straight to putting the pieces together, but if you progress in this hobby you'll start to remove the mould lines like I am here. Although I generally don't read the instructions, I do recommend you do, because I stupidly went and cut the supports off for the head, but luckily I own some glue so I can fix my mistake and actually make the head fit into the model like it's supposed to. Generally you'll find that the newer and starter kits will all be push fit. The pegs and the holes are generally quite tight, so you might find you have to push a little bit harder than you thought. And again, if you progress in the hobby, you'll tend to start filing these down to make them fit a bit easier. Or remove them completely and use some liquid glue to fuse everything together. You might find that you're not quite sure which way round to go and put everything, as each peg is round and not keyed or indexed in any way. But as this is a starter model, it really isn't that difficult to figure out in the end. Now, if you're only interested in playing the war games with your friends and having battles, you could use the pieces as they are, especially if you weren't interested in painting. Also, if you were to go to your local hobby store and have a painting session, they'd normally give you the model completely built first. As I like to personalise all of my little pieces, I'll be using this excess sprue that's sticking out to make some purity seals. I'll just cut thin discs off and stick it to some masking tape. If you get into this hobby, you'll start to learn about the lore of all the factions, and you can use this to upgrade your figures to give them a little bit of a history and backstory. To convert these discs into what looks like pressed wax, I'll be using some Tamiya Extra thin and applying it on top of the discs. I'll then let it soak in for a minute, melting the plastic, and apply the cocktail stick on top, pressing down. This will then push the melted plastic down in the middle and force it out around the edges, making little crusty edges. I've found that using cocktail sticks will break first when pushing down too hard, and as I can show you here, using metal tweezers and pushing down too hard will actually crack the little disc in two. Even if you know what you're doing, it's generally best to create more than you actually need. This way, if some fail or some are too thin, you can pick the ones that look the best. To create the scrolls that are attached to the wax seals, it's just a simple matter of cutting out the pieces still on the masking tape. When they've all been removed, you can either fold the masking tape up onto itself to remove the sticky side, or apply it to another piece of masking tape. As I generally don't plan ahead, I didn't leave enough masking tape to fold back on itself, so I'm having to stick them to another piece of tape instead. Once again, when they've been removed and cut out individually, it's time to trim them down so they're more in scale with the actual figure. The best way to do this, I find, instead of just randomly cutting away, is to grab the figure you've just created and place it next to the scroll. If you're wondering why the masking tape has to be 2 layers thick, it's because if you fold the masking tape it generally holds its shape, making it much easier to make it look like a flowing scroll, which gives your model figure the illusion of motion on a static piece of plastic, providing a little bit more visual interest. Once the better pieces have been selected, you could glue them straight to the model, but I'm going to leave them off till later, as you wouldn't do this for your first try. Now this might sound weird, but I don't actually have a starter kit, so the paints I'm going to use are an approximation of what comes in the latest sets. So arguably the end result will be fairly similar to your first experience. As I did scratch build some extras for this little model, I will be using colours that won't come in an original starter set to paint the wax disc and the little paper scroll. Can you guess which set I bought if you see the other colours that came with it? The brush that comes with the set is what I would call adequate for the task if you're painting for the first time, but the only action this brush sees now is removing the dry tip from my airbrush. Again, you wouldn't normally prime the model your first time, but I can't help myself. It would also be easy to use black, but I run out, so I pick white. Here you can see I've got two identical models. The one on the left is the one I just built, and the one on the right is a bit different. The right one has been used for free painting sessions and has multiple coats, and the thick layers of paint have covered up all the details. As this will be your first time, you won't have a wet palette. So when your parents force you to come shopping to the supermarket, grab one of these little plastic trays that you can use to hold your paints that used to hold their little products in. If you want the paint to last longer, mix it with a little bit of water and then just slap it straight onto the model. Just go for it. Have fun. Ignore technique. Just paint. And if this is your first time painting, do not compare it to any of the box art or magazines. It takes years to build up that skill, and you can't walk around with a Photoshop filter in real life. However, you will find that your first paintwork is a bit patchy. So just add a little bit of water to the paint to rehydrate it and slap that paint all over it again. This is about having fun. Don't worry about what you're doing. Technique will come later. Just keep going until all you see is blue all over your little figure. You will abuse your brush, so pinching it in your hand and twisting will help try and keep a little point on there. To make the weapon look a little bit different from the figure, you will probably end up painting it black. And as you can see here, you'll probably get bored with the water, so I'm going to show you using the paint straight out of the pot works just as well. It's at this point that I would really like to use one of my better brushes, as we're going to start painting some of the details, but I will stick to my brush that's fairly similar to the brush that comes in the kit. To paint all the small details using the metallic paint, it's time to learn your first technique. To keep your fingers stable and stop them from wobbling, press your two hands together. This simple action will make it easier to paint all the small details, and as you can see, the larger the area you paint, the further apart my hands are. When it's time to paint areas that are close to other parts, I find gently inserting the tip of the brush and then pulling away helps with the small spaces. For the eyes, you might find the brush is bigger than the actual eye sockets. As we're only putting paint in there, a safety pin or a needle could actually be used as a brush. All you have to do is dip the tip into the paint and you have a very fine tipped brush. Now remember, you don't have to paint the figure the right way up, so keep moving it until it's easier for you to paint. Just remembering to keep your hands pressed against each other. I also find that sometimes when it's the small little parts, taking a deep breath in and holding it does steady my fingers. If you do want to progress in this hobby, I would recommend buying different paints though. The more you start to learn, the more you realise that these pots are designed to waste as much paint as possible. Although I'm painting my base with a little bit of brown from the rest of my paints, this won't be necessary for your first attempt. The technical paint that you get in the set will already be pre-coloured. Mine is grey however. I also wouldn't use your paintbrush to apply this. I would use a liberated stick from the coffee machines. However tempting it is to grab a large chunk of this technical paint, it is a lot easier to apply in small amounts. It's very simple to apply, just dab it onto the base and it'll just stick just fine. Usually the bases have no detail, so just apply it all over. This figure came with some detail, so I just applied it on top of the rocks. As you won't want it all over his feet, a cocktail stick is very good at just nudging that paint into all the creases. If I remember correctly, the original starter models have their insignia on raised little details. What I suggest is to add some white paint to your brush and use the side of the brush instead of the tip to apply the paint. If you'd bought a magazine to find out what this hobby is about, you may have got a free decal sheet to use instead. I personally only buy the magazines for the freebies. So for this figure, I'm freehanding a pair of, yeah, you're going to figure it out. Now if you happen to scratch build some of your own little pieces like I did, this would be a good time to paint them if you hadn't already attached them to your model. I will say to make sure that you paint both sides of the masking tape, as the paint will help seal it in and keep it protected. For the writing on the scrolls, to make it look like there's something on there, chug down on some sort of energy drink, or like me, drink a couple of double espressos, grab the fine tip needle and let your jittery fingers make those little letters. And before the nice little off-white base coat dries on the masking tape, apply those little folds to make the scroll look like it's blowing in the wind. As the paints are acrylic and dry very fast, it won't be too long before you apply the super glue to the scroll and stick it to your little figure. Now again, your model is ready to be brought onto the battlefield. You could varnish it, but I'm too lazy and you haven't got any varnish yet. If you were competitive and wanted to battle officially, you could say this model is done. But we've yet to use the pot of skill. The shade pots of paint are very good at picking out all the little details. I did choose to paint the model that had lots of thick layers of paint on it, so it won't work as well, but I'm sure being your first time you'll apply the paint too thick just like I did. The two main ways to use this paint are either to paint all the little creases and crevasses in the model and spend ages going all around all of them little details, like you can see here, especially on that little skull wingy thing on his chest. But if it's your first time, I'd choose the second option. Just cover the whole model, just slap it on all over the place, everywhere, as thick as you can, as thin as you can, doesn't matter. Gravity will pull it down, the creases will suck it in, and it will dry randomly all over the flat surfaces. This will highlight all the small details, create fake shadows, and make your figure not look like it's factory fresh. Again, close up, this does look like the model is finished. However, from a distance, it's just going to look like a dark blue blob. So add a little bit of that white into your original blue to make a lighter version of that blue. I have exaggerated it by adding too much white to help you visualize what's actually happening. As the shade has made these shadows and darkened all the creases, the lighter blue will be painted on all the little raised edges. This is known as edge highlighting. Just go around the little figure and pick out the areas that are raised. For large areas like the spheres on his knees, just dab some of that highlight paint to the top right or top left of the knee. Once you're happy you've highlighted all the raised edges, do the same with your metallic paint, making sure you only apply it to the upper surfaces. This is where the light will reflect the most, so don't go all the way around. For the purity seal, just reapply the same red to the external edges and it will help it stand out. To make the black weapon stand out, you could just rub it with a pencil. I want to try out my new metallic pencil, so I'm going to use that. But a normal pencil will do just the same. Just like the edge highlighting, the pencil will do the same. Rub it all over the edges and it'll bring out all those little details. If you are going to use a pencil, it's best to use one that has a softer lead. And you'll have to Google if it's more H or B, because I can't remember. If you happen to have a female partner, wife, girlfriend, or whatever they call themselves, borrow one of their makeup brushes and then gently dab it into the white paint. Now this might sound insane, but wipe most of it onto a tissue and keep brushing the back of your hand until there's hardly any paint left on the brush. This technique is called dry brushing. When there's hardly any paint left on the makeup brush, gently swipe it across the technical paint you applied to the base. This will leave paint on the raised edges and give you a quick edge highlighting. Just remember to clean the brush properly, otherwise your partner will probably end up, you don't want to know. I'm fairly confident the black isn't just for the weapon, but I just can't figure out what else it could be used for. Maybe the black is part of all the base of all their sets. And with that, I think I can call this model done. So what I've done here is shown 3 different distances that the figure will actually be viewed from. If you are actually interested in playing the game and having battles, this is pretty much all you need to do. Also, if this is your first time painting a miniature, this is pretty much what it's going to look like. It'll look good from a distance, but not so great close up. But if you're starting out, this is a great little benchmark for you to aim for. So again, thanks for watching and have fun.